for joining us on this call today about an issue that is really important for all of our state, and that is digital equity. For many of us, having the internet is really a given. We use it to pay our bills, we use it to pay our taxes, we keep in touch with our families, and we do it on our own time in our own homes and even on our own phones. But as I have talked to so many families across our state, I've heard from far too many that getting online isn't easy to do. And the digital divide is a serious challenge that has overwhelming effects on communities of color, communities with disabilities, low-income households, seniors, rural communities, and so many others. And now, following on this pandemic that moved our schools and our healthcare system and our work and so many other of our daily activities online, an internet connection really is must have, unquestionably, in order for people to keep up. That's one of the many reasons why I'm so excited that President Biden's American Jobs Plan, because it will bring affordable, reliable, high-speed broadband to the more than 30 million Americans that live in areas without it, including, by the way, the nearly 9% of people in Washington state who do not have adequate access to reliable broadband. But a connection is not much use if you don't have the means to use it. And that's where the Digital Equity Act comes in. It will make sure that people have the tools, the skills, and the support that they need to fully take advantage of a broadband connection when they have access to one. What it does is invests about $1.4 billion in local digital equity programs over 5 years, because we know it is actually leaders on the ground who understand the needs best of their own communities and who will make sure that these dollars go to good use. And this money could be used for everything from helping a school to district to purchase laptops, or hotspots to help with remote learning, or funding a local library to set up digital literacy classes for seniors, and a lot of other things. Now, I actually proposed this bill before the COVID-19 pandemic because the digital divide was an issue before the COVID-19 pandemic. And the past 15 months have only made this worse. I have heard heart-wrenching stories from across our state. And let me share one story with you that particularly struck me. It was about a local Grant County girl who studied very hard to be the first one in her family to go to college on a full scholarship. She even got a laptop through one of her scholarships. Fast forward, the pandemic hits. Her campus closed. She has to go back home. Her family could not afford internet. So what does she do? She waited every night for her parents to get home. She takes her family's one car that they own to a truck stop on I-90 and sat outside of that truck stop to use that public Wi-Fi and do her homework at night. Now, I gotta admire her perseverance, but that broke my heart. This young girl is our future, and no one should have to go to such lengths to simply get an education. So COVID-19 has really been a wake-up call and hopefully a reality check for our leaders. It is time to invest in broadband and digital equity in a big way. The need for action just could not be clearer. So I am really excited to announce that this Congress, the Digital Equity Act, will be bipartisan, with Senator Portman co-leading it with me. This is really great to show that we have momentum, and it really means that we are one step closer to taking real, meaningful action to ensure that we're not a nation of haves and have-nots when it comes to getting online. And when we do pass this bill, and we will, it's going to help our local leaders on the ground who are seeing the costs of the digital divide and working to promote digital equity every day. People like Brad and Lisa and David and Sharonne and Dr. Enfield, who are on this call with me today and who will share their experiences. So I'm really glad to turn it over to them now to share their perspectives and talk about why a federal investment in digital equity would make such a big difference for families in Washington state and across the country. And I will start by turning it over to Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, who knows this issue so well. Great to see you, Brad. Turn it over to you.
Well, great to see you, Senator, and thanks. It's great to be here with all of you. And let me just start by saying how excited I am to use Microsoft's voice and make clear our strong support as a company for the Digital Equity Act. I think this legislation represents a vital part of this nation's future. It can be transformative for so many people in so many communities across the country. I think first, it's really focused on solving an urgent problem that we need to solve as a nation. As Senator Murray put it, we live in an obviously interconnected country and world. And there's really three parts of the problem that come together. And I think the good news is the Digital Equity Act helps address all three parts. First, as Senator Murray said, people do need connectivity. The story of Grant County and I-90 is one that we see in so many rural communities across this nation. As we like to say, broadband has become the electricity of the 21st century. None of us could imagine getting up in the morning and feeling good for even a moment about having tens of millions of Americans live in a country without electricity, yet we still live in a country where tens of millions of people live without broadband. But second, one of the things we've really learned from the pandemic, as Senator Murray said, is that connectivity alone is not enough. In fact, what I really say we've learned from the pandemic is that a smartphone alone is not enough. If you think about the kind of video conversation we're having today, if you think about having a telehealth consultation, if you think about doing your homework or attending a class, a small screen is not sufficient. But we live in a country where tens of millions of people are trying to use the internet with their phone alone. And that's why access to devices is such a critical part of this as well. And third, as Senator Murray said, it really is about the skills. The skills are the game changer for people. It's what will open a pathway to a brighter future. It will help people not just broaden themselves, but more importantly, seek and obtain the kinds of jobs that we need to continue to foster for everyone across the country. I'll say two last things as well. One of the other reasons that we're so enthusiastic about the Digital Equity Act is I think it goes about addressing these problems in the right way. And that is to say, it's not one solution for every corner of all 50 states. By creating a program that provides grants to the states, this legislation empowers the states to address local needs in a way that is sensitive to local communities. And we see this every day. We recognize that there are many urban centers in the United States where broadband is present, but it's not affordable. And we see many communities, especially for the African American and Black community or the Latinx community, where it's not just about access to broadband, but making it affordable, about providing programs that will reach these groups in the ways that local institutions recognize and will advance. And then my final thought, a transition, if you will, as well, is ultimately the key to success is about bringing governments together, companies together, nonprofits together, and many other institutions that just represent the fundamental fabric of our lives and of our neighborhoods. And one of the things that we at Microsoft have learned in recent years is that whether you live in a large city or a small town, in the year 2021, as in the year 1921, there are few institutions that play a more important role than the nation's libraries. And that will continue even as more people connect in new ways. That's why I'm really pleased and privileged to pass the microphone, if you will, to Lisa Rosenblum to speak as Executive Director of the King County set of libraries.
Thank you, Brad. What a great lead-in. And I want to thank you, Senator Murray. King County Library System and public libraries are key broadband providers in many communities. We always knew prior to the pandemic that there was a digital divide, but sadly, we were proved correct time and time again over this past year as we struggled to fill this ongoing demand. Public libraries, as you know, provide internet access, computers, and knowledgeable staff to support students and parents, job seekers, entrepreneurs, English language learners, and our new arrivals to help them successfully navigate the systems and services that they need in our complex communities. In 2020, KCLS leveraged our county digital equity grants to address COVID-related library closures and disruptions to our in-library services. We hated to close our libraries to in-person services, but we had to. So what we did, and that story, Senator Murray, about that student in the parking lot really resonated with us. We significantly increased the amplification of our Wi-Fi exterior antennas to increase internet access from our library properties, parking lots, and adjacent spaces. So at least we had a strong signal in our parking lots. In Skyway, Washington, we are participating with the University of Washington project to create a community-based cellular broadband network. We lend grant-funded laptop computers with Wi-Fi hotspots to homeless facilities. For example, in Renton, a vacant hotel that provides temporary emergency housing uses KCLS equipment and internet access to schedule COVID-19 vaccination appointments. They told us that they couldn't have done it without us. It couldn't have been a vaccination site without our help. And in 5 communities, and this is the most exciting thing, I think, we are partnering with healthcare providers such as Harborview Medical Center to launch Teleconnect later this year. And this is to facilitate telehealth and web-based medical consultation in the library for people lacking the technology or assistance to do that from their own homes. The need for increased digital equity interventions like these outstrip our current funding. Our research has identified 4 populations that are experiencing the current highest need for greater access to public computing. They include seniors and those at the highest risk of contracting COVID-19, K-12 students, including foster children and college students, people experience homelessness, and our working poor households. Members of these groups were among the first to experience the economic fallout from COVID-19 and have high rates of ongoing need. Our library cannot respond to the breadth and depth of these community needs with our basic operating revenue. Federal investment in digital equity is needed to bridge these gaps in internet access in our communities and to ensure the healthy success of everyone. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to David to talk more.
Great, thanks, Lisa. It's great to be here. Good afternoon, and thank you, Senator Murray, for the opportunity to join with you and Brad and others here on this this great step forward for digital equity and broadband adoption in our local community, in our state, and in our country. You know, and like others have said, I continue to see that the digital divide continues to be very real for many, and that it's hard to see that. You know, if you're someone who has multiple devices, if you have great internet service, if you can afford those internet services both on the go and at home, and you have those digital skills to take advantage of all that's offered online. We see that, and that's essential to our delivery of local government services here as well, that people have all those elements. And we also see that the social, economic, and educational cost of being on the other side of the divide is huge. You know, daily, as I'm talking to people, I hear of parents still trying to figure out, how do I improve Wi-Fi in my apartment so that my kid could get online, or so that I can take my job training or telecommute. We also hear of shelters and organizations who are in housing who are trying to get the internet back into throughout the building or in rooms to solve their issues. You know, we still have challenges trying to get internet to some of the community anchor organizations in our community. And so these things are really critical, and there's an opportunity for local solutions that some of the Digital Equity Act will help address. And I know, you know, I and many others from here to Ohio to Maine and down to Florida have all experienced that challenge of helping stay connected and help family members connect during the pandemic. And we see that communities of color, elders, those with lower education, and people with disabilities still suffer the most from not addressing this. And also, as we've worked a lot, throughout the state in trying to address some of the digital equity and digital divide issues, we still see that this really cuts across our urban, suburban, and rural areas. And I can't stress that enough, how much we see the similar challenges, and the need to continue that work in parallel for both broadband deployment, getting it out so people can get access, and the other elements of ensuring that people can sign up for internet service, that they have sufficient and affordable internet, have the digital skills to be able to use it, and the tech support or the navigation, and also that we design applications in a way that are user-friendly, to help folks get online and use that effectively. And last year during the pandemic, an Internet for All resolution was adopted by our Seattle City Council and signed by Mayor Durkin, which set the goal of enabling all Seattle residents to access and adopt broadband internet service that's reliable and affordable. But we can't do it alone. So we work really closely with community groups, and the support of the state and federal government is critical in being able to move that forward. And I really want to appreciate that the proposed Digital Equity Act has this combination of capacity building state grants, the targeted action grants, and support for research and evidence-based policymaking. Because I think that's a smart solution that helps our local governments and state governments address those issues, and to more effectively do that in conjunction, with the technology companies, with the schools and libraries, and the trusted diverse community organizations we work with and collaborate with. And that kind of investment will also enable scaling of local solutions, like the Digital Bridge pilot program we did here with Seattle Jobs and Seattle Goodwill, helping unemployed workers get access to internet, to a device, to start to assess their digital skills and connect them with training. And so that's like the first rung up in helping folks with those gateway skills, so that they can take that health tech job, or that take the diesel mechanic skills training. They need that foundational level. So digital skills continues to be really important. And finally, I think the work on the state government development of digital inclusion plans will be really helpful and help leverage other investments. We've been working with state and tribal leaders, libraries, and others to share information about the emergency broadband benefit, for instance, and having a coherent plan in the digital inclusion plans will be really helpful for all of us. And lastly, I really appreciate that the Digital Equity Act recognizes the work that the NTIA and the Department of Commerce has done federally, and that's something that that helps enable local and federal sharing of data and best practices both ways, so that we can have effective policies and practices. It enables us to share information across agencies and departments and with the community as well. So appreciate that approach and the sort of smart approach, and thank you for and the bipartisan co-sponsors for recognizing these needs and taking these critical steps. So, and as we've worked closely and really rely on the trusted ambassadors in the community to help find local solutions and implement them, those trusted community organizations are really critical. And so I have the pleasure to introduce Sharonne Navas from the Equity and Education Coalition next. So thanks.
Thank you, David. Senator Murray, thank you so much for having me on. As David said, I'm Sharonne Navas. I'm the co-founder of the Equity and Education Coalition. We are a community-based organization that has a statewide footprint in Washington State. And we began getting involved in the digital equity world, just like almost every other person, right after COVID hit Washington State first. We were under the false understanding that everyone had the internet because I have the internet, right? And my friends have the internet, and I don't know of anybody with the internet. But then as we were doing research, we realized that 18,500 households in King County alone didn't have the internet. And as we were doing more and more research and outreach to school districts, we were beginning to realize that there was about 285,000 students that didn't have internet access at the height of at the height of COVID. As an organization that is based in communities of color and centers the idea of equity, we transitioned very quickly to be COVID rapid response. So not only were we doing food assistance and mask distribution, but we, through a small grant through King County, were able to distribute 50,000 headsets to Southeast and South King County. I know Dr. Enfield Highline School District got about 15,000 headsets to distribute to their students. And as people were beginning to realize that we had headsets, we were getting more and more phone calls. And for us, it was really important to link education with healthcare, healthcare with housing, housing with food assistance, and food assistance with everything else. It became very clear that not only were we suffering through the Maslow's needs of understanding, but internet became one of those needs. Internet was the one thing technically that was holding this whole state together, and to have so many people not know how to get online, how to open their laptop. So on February 1st of 2021, my organization, along with a small investment from Facebook, launched something called Tech Connect Washington, which is the nation's first multilingual, multicultural call-in center that offers technical support for families, community-based organizations, and students in their own language. We started with about 50 tickets a week and are now looking at about 300 to 400 tickets a day. All of these phone calls are from Washington State residents, Washington State folks that are living here. We've just entered into contract with the Wenatchee School District. All of these services are offered for free for our students and our families. And I can't tell you how many families are calling just to really understand how to get online, how to do things like get information about rental evictions in the moratorium, how to get food. We were a little aghast that the vaccine rollout meant you had to be online to get an appointment. And we quickly pivoted from all the work that we were doing at that point to create vaccine pop-ups where we were calling our families and making those basic phone calls. I know one of our team members was on a landline, and I was sort of shocked that she had a landline, but whatever, she was making phone calls to her families and her elders, and we got thousands of people to come to get their vaccines. And at the same time, we offered them food, we offered them assistance. We took that time and opportunity to find out not only can they afford the internet, but do they have the tools to be online with their families. And when we did outreach here in South King County, we realized that the average household that we were talking to had 4 students and 3 adults. So that's 7 people online at the same time, and there's rarely anyone that has enough broadband that can sustain that and still do things like finish schoolwork. And now that I've been talking about education, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Susan Enfield over at the Highline School District.
Thank you, Sharon. And thank you, Senator Murray, for highlighting this issue of digital equity. When the pandemic forced schools to close in March of 2020, it was quickly apparent to me and my colleagues that children would not be able to attend school without a working device and adequate home broadband. And we also knew that that was not the reality for too many of our children and families. And I want to be clear, we've known about the digital divide for years, and we chose to look away because we could. The pandemic made it clear that we could no longer look away. And that's a good thing. But I think the question now is, will we continue to not look away? And I think investments that Senator Murray and others are looking at making will help keep this issue at the forefront, so that no child is denied access to their education because they aren't physically within their school walls. So for Highline, a richly diverse district of just under 18,000 students, we quickly mobilized to deploy 13,000 of our existing devices in schools to children and families to take home. So we were quite confident early on that our children had the devices, but without home broadband access, those devices were not going to be much more than a paperweight. And in some cases, quite frankly, some of those devices were in need of repair. And so when we received our first round of federal ESSER dollars, we received $6 million in that first of 3 rounds. Of that 6 million, over 3.5 million went towards providing devices and connectivity for our students. We've provided thousands of hotspots. We've been grateful for partners like Sharonne and others in the community who stepped up to make sure that we could provide our students and families with what they needed in order to get through this time. And I think what's clear is that there is no single heroic entity that will be able to come in and address this issue alone. This is truly going to have to be, and I think that this bill indicates that, sort of a multifaceted effort that involves all of us working together towards a common goal. And I know that we're short on time, so I will just end with this. Our children have now all, for the most part, here in Highline, we just surveyed our families, 97% now say they have home broadband access and working devices. But how do we make sure that lasts? There is no guarantee that that lasts. Some of the work we've done to get them that connectivity is going to run out soon. And so we are scrambling to make that not so. But I will just end with this, that we have to make sure that the fact that our children now live in a world where learning is no longer confined to the physical schoolhouse is not taken away from them. To go back to a time where children, all children, every single child in this country doesn't have access to their learning no matter where they are, would not only be unconscionable, but I would argue it would be foolish and short-sighted for us as a nation, because this is now, I would argue, the issue of digital equity and forever closing the digital divide is fundamental to ensuring the promise of public education for every child in the United States.